So, war it's to be then. The political class running the bureaucratic Frankenstein that is the EU are no longer even trying to hide their totalitarian streak. The EU bureaucrats have let it be known that they do not approve of member states picking political leaders they disagree with or who contradict their elitist worldviews. Speaking recently at a session of the G7, the unelected leader of the EU, Jean-Claude Juncker, attacked Boris Johnson, the former mayor of London, suggesting that his Euroscepticism was not in line with reality. In the recent election in Austria, Juncker has stated that there have been systems put in place that will shut out any elected leaders that espouse populist sentiments. What his definitions of populism are is just as opaque as the shadowy cabal that seeks to reject and subvert the democratic will of the peoples of Europe. In fact, Juncker's right-hand man, Martin Selmayer's demand that populism be combated also betrays the EU's instinctive distrust of democracy. Selmayer, among other things, has been accused of sending false figures showing a decline in the numbers of migrants entering the EU from Turkey to justify a €3 billion funding deal with the Turkish authorities. As well, he has been described by diplomats as Stalinist in his centrism. Described by many, the EU is inherently anti-democratic, demonstrated by its treatment of Greece and an approach to referendums best summed up as, you can vote as many times as you like, so long as you eventually vote for what we want. The ruling unelected political class, along with Europhiles Merkel, Holland, and others, are firm. Anyone who questions the status quo is a potential extremist, and they seem to genuinely believe this. In the wake of the migrant crisis that Angela Merkel helped mushroom with her blanket invitation for the entire world to come to Germany and live off state handouts, she discussed with Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg on the need to clamp down on dissident speech. And now it looks as though companies like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Microsoft have all fallen in line and agreed to block quote-unquote illegal hate speech from their European services. And in a twist, news of the EU and social media's collaboration to silence any dissident voices as it pertains to the migrant crisis fell on the same day as news breaking of another instance of mass sexual assault upon European women by migrant men. But more on that later. The new European Union Code of Conduct on Illegal Online Hate Speech states the 4 internet companies will review reports of hate speech in less than 24 hours and remove the content or disable access if necessary. Anybody with an interest in getting certain types of content removed is going to find this interesting. It's stated that this latest move is in response to a surge in anti-Semitic, anti-immigrant, and pro-Islamic State commentary on social media. Okay, well, let's break this down. First, a surge in anti-Semitism. I wonder where this could be coming from. Oh, yeah, that's right. Europe's exploding Muslim communities, as well as their unholy alliance with the radical left and the fascist organizations that unironically call themselves anti-fascists. France, Germany, Holland, Sweden, countries with the largest Muslim populations and the largest intake of migrants, are all seeing their Jewish communities fleeing from their countries as anti-Semitism builds in concert with the growth of their Islamic populations. The next pretext for the new clampdown on freedom of speech? Anti-immigrant commentary. Well, who didn't see this coming? With report after report after report of the explosion in rape of women and children and even men perpetrated upon the native populations by the incoming mass of Islamic migrants, with report after report after report of mass sexual assaults in countries all over the continent, with report after report after report of people being forced to change their lifestyles, of having to live in fear of violence and criminality, of having fear of one's property, one's own body, and the safety of their children being compromised by politicians like Chancellor Merkel. And Mother Merkel, as she's known to her army of male Muslim migrants, has also imported the Arab rape game Taharush, as it has established itself in Europe, as reported by the German newspaper Die Welt. The Arab rape game Taharush is about a large group of Arab men surrounding their victim, usually a Western woman or woman wearing Western-style clothing, and the women are subjected to horrific sexual abuse. The men in the inner circle are the ones who physically and sexually abuse the women. The next circle are the spectators, while the mission of the third circle is to distract and divert attention to what's going on. In addition to the events in Cologne, police in Berlin, Hamburg, Frankfurt, Dusseldorf, and Stuttgart have reported similar incidents. In addition, police in Vienna and Salzburg in Austria and Zurich in Switzerland have raised the alarm about similar mass assaults against women by newly arrived Arab migrants. These mass sexual assaults are now becoming a regular fixture of European life, such as the attacks that were reported to have taken place at a German music festival in Darmstadt and were touched on earlier in this presentation, and were reported on the same day as the EU social media clampdown on dissenting opinions was released. For many, this is a catastrophe and the end of life as they have always known it. But to question any of these newly imported customs is to be met with a wall of accusations of racism and bigotry. People have already been interrogated by police in many countries when they have commented on the negative effects that this crisis is having on their communities and countries. Now the noose to suppress speech is being tightened ever more, with people no longer being able to express dissatisfaction, as it will now just be labeled hate speech. And those that have sentiments that are not government sanctioned will now have what little voice they had taken away. The final justification is the surge in commentary by Muslims that live in Europe that express pro-ISIS sentiments. Oh, does the universe have a sense of humor or what? After a 2-decade-long explosion in radical jihadist ideology and of terrorist groups throughout the Middle East, Europe then, in a spectacular feat of civilizational stupidity, throws open the gates to millions of unvetted men, most of whom are military age, and is surprised to see an uptick in expressions of radical Islam and jihadist sympathy. And it's even already been well documented that second and third generations Muslims living in Europe are generally more radicalized than their forebears. This would be funny if it weren't so deadly serious. The political class in much of Western Europe has gone about systematically creating the conditions for all of the things that it now states must be suppressed, and will do so by muffling the freedom of speech for all of its citizens. This is beginning to border on Darth Sidious levels of Machiavellian conspiratorial stratagems. And ironically, just 2 days ago, the Dalai Lama, the leader of Tibetan Buddhism, said there are too many migrants pouring into Europe, warning against the continent becoming Arabized, and claiming the solution is the eventual repatriation of migrants. He continued, there are too many at the moment. Europe, Germany in particular, cannot become an Arab country. Germany is Germany. His comments are almost the same as those made by Europe's anti-Islamization Pegida movement, and similar comments have been made by groups like France's Front National, Germany's Alternative for Deutschland, and to a lesser extent, Britain's United Kingdom Independence Party. Speaking to Germany's Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung newspaper, the Dalai Lama, who is perhaps the world's most famous refugee, said this weekend the goal should be to return and help rebuild their own countries. But groups such as the Front National, Pegida, and UKIP are usually lambasted as racist or xenophobic for saying so, and saying the exact same thing. The Dalai Lama, however, was recently named the most popular world leader, with over 3/4 of adults, at 78% on average, having a good opinion of him. But it would now seem as though, at least according to Juncker, Merkel, Holland, and their ilk, that the Dalai Lama is a hate-filled, xenophobic bigot, and his views should be censored and banned in Europe. Oh, this is thick with delicious irony. But either way, the political class in Western Europe has now cut off all avenues for political compromise. It has already stated that it will not allow any political parties nor candidates that it does not approve of to be allowed a seat at the table nor voice in governing. This now makes almost all political solutions to this self-inflicted catastrophe next to impossible. The political class has also co-opted the corporate gatekeepers of information to now begin suppressing any speech that does not conform with their narrow view on what is acceptable opinions. On top of this, as stated previously, and can be seen in more detail in some of my previous videos, they have already begun to arrest people across the continent for voicing their disgruntlement at the policies that created this disaster in the first place. With the people's voice taken away, with their right to conscience and expression taken away, and with all political avenues to reconcile this catastrophe being closed, there is no way that this will now end peacefully. And maybe that this is what the political, industrial, and corporate classes have been hoping for since the start. Either way, the die is cast, the board is set, the pieces are moving. This is the deep breath before the plunge. And one way or another, sooner or later, war it will be. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please consider subscribing, and I'd like to point you to the channel Millennial Woes. He has some very insightful and interesting commentary. You will not be disappointed.